Some secrets are buried to keep them safe, Eleanor Morgan used to say. Others are buried because the wrong person is still searching. Rachel had not remembered those words in years. Not until her scissors struck metal inside a curtain that should have held nothing but dust. Rain whispered against the front windows of Morgan Alterations, turning the empty street beyond the glass into a blur of gold and black. It was almost midnight in Black Ridge, Massachusetts, and every store on the block had gone dark except hers. Rachel sat beneath the warm glow of an old brass lamp, surrounded by thread, paper patterns, and 3 unpaid bills she had placed face down beside the register. She did not need to read them again. 2 months behind on utilities, 1 missed loan payment, 10 days before the bank reviewed the future of the shop her grandmother had left her. Rachel pushed the thought aside and returned to the black velvet spread across her cutting table. She had bought the curtain that morning at an estate liquidation for $28. The auction clerk had called it ruined. One edge was faded and the lining smelled faintly of cedar, but the velvet itself was heavy, soft and strong. Enough for the winter coat a customer had ordered. Maybe enough for a second coat if Rachel planned every cut carefully. Waste nothing, Eleanor had taught her that too. Rachel turned the lower hem beneath the lamp and frowned. The stitching did not match the rest of the curtain. Black thread crossed beneath silver in a pattern of tiny knots, each one hidden inside the next. It looked decorative at first, then she saw the loose loop buried beneath the fold. Her fingers went still. A memory returned with startling clarity, Eleanor guiding her 8-year-old hands over a scrap of cloth. Never pull the first knot, sweetheart. Find the sleeping stitch. Rachel had always assumed it was one of her grandmother's games. Eleanor had names for every technique. Listening seams, honest, sleeping stitches. Rachel touched the loose loop. Cold moved through her fingertip. She pulled back. The shop heater rattled 6 feet away, blowing warm air across the floor, yet the velvet felt like it had been left outside in January. Rachel glanced toward the dark windows. Nothing moved beyond the rain. She picked up her smallest seam ripper. "Let's see what you were hiding," she murmured. The first stitch opened, then the second. Her hands remembered the sequence before her mind did. Across, beneath, turn, release. The silver thread shimmered beneath the lamp, the lining separated, revealing a narrow pocket sewn deep inside the hem. Rachel reached in and withdrew a bundle wrapped in black silk. It was no larger than a hat box, but its weight surprised her. The silk was sealed with the same strange stitching. Rachel should have stopped. She should have locked the bundle in the back room and called the auction company in the morning. Instead, she found the sleeping stitch. Across, turn, release. The final knot loosened without her touching it. The silk fell open. A crown rested in her hands. Dark metal curved into slender points like frozen flames. Deep red stones sat along the rim, not sparkling, but holding the light somewhere inside them. It was too finely made to be a theatre prop and too old to belong in an ordinary estate sale. Rachel set it on the table as carefully as if it were made of glass. Her first thought was that it might be stolen. Her second was that no ordinary thief would hide something like this inside a curtain. She searched the inner rim for a maker's mark. There, beneath the largest stone, was a symbol, a needle crossing a crescent moon. Rachel's breath caught. The same mark had been carved into the wooden base of Eleanor's sewing machine. She touched it. A thin silver line appeared beneath the skin of her wrist. Rachel stared as it curled slowly into the shape of a needle and moon. The cold deepened. Every clock in the shop stopped at once. The wall clock above the register, the digital display near the door. Then the crown made a sound. Thump. Rachel stepped back. Thump, not gears, not metal settling. A heartbeat. 4 blocks away, high inside a private council chamber above Romano Tower, Alessandro Romano rose without warning. 12 figures around the black stone table fell silent. For 300 years the ancient bond beneath his ribs had been empty. Now it burned with recognition. Alessandro turned toward the rain-covered windows, his pale face becoming perfectly still. "My king?" one councillor asked. Alessandro closed his eyes. The signal was faint but near, moving through the city like a bell heard underwater. "Prepare the cars," he said. Back inside the shop, Rachel wrapped the crown in silk, but the heartbeat grew faster. Thump, thump, thump. Headlights swept across the windows. One black car stopped at the curb, then another, then a third. Dark-coated figures stepped into the rain. The last man emerged without an umbrella. He was tall, dressed entirely in black, his skin unnaturally pale beneath the streetlight. Rachel stood behind her cutting table with the wrapped crown in one hand, her scissors still resting in the other from her work. The stranger lifted his gaze toward the glass. The heartbeat stopped. The silver mark on Rachel's wrist blazed white. Alessandro Romano did not look at the crown, he looked directly at her. For 3 long seconds, Rachel Morgan and the pale stranger watched each other through the rain-streaked glass. The silver mark on her wrist burned cold beneath her skin. Outside, the men in dark coats waited beside 3 black cars, but none of them moved until the stranger raised one hand. The gesture was small, the response was immediate, every man stopped. Rachel noticed that before anything else. Whoever stood outside her shop did not need to repeat himself. He crossed the sidewalk alone and opened the door. The bell above it gave a thin chime. Cold air entered with him. Up close he appeared to be in his mid-30s, but there was something much older in the stillness of his face. His skin was paler than Rachel's, almost white beneath the warm brass lamp. Dark hair framed sharp features, and his grey eyes turned silver when they found the glowing symbol on her wrist. Rachel remained behind the cutting table. The wrapped crown rested beside her hand. Her scissors were still in her fingers because she had been working when the cars arrived, but she did not raise them. "The shop is closed," she said. "I know." His voice was calm, low, and touched by an accent she could not place. His gaze moved toward the silk bundle. "I came for what you found." Rachel shifted slightly, placing herself between him and the table. "You arrived very quickly for someone who does not know what I found. I knew it had awakened. That does not explain who you are." Alessandro Romano. The name struck a familiar note. Romano Tower stood 4 blocks away, a black wall of glass above the older buildings of Blackridge. Rachel had also seen his family name on a hospital wing and a scholarship fund. She had never expected the man behind it to walk into her store after midnight. "Your name still does not explain the cars," she said. One of the guards outside stepped closer. Alessandro did not turn, remain outside. The guard stopped. Rachel looked from him to Alessandro. "Do they always obey you that quickly?" "Usually faster." It was not a joke. That made it worse. Alessandro took one measured step toward the table. Rachel lifted her free hand. "Stop there." He stopped. No irritation, no threat, only a quiet assessment that made the room feel smaller. "The object inside that silk was stolen 300 years ago," he said. "I purchased the fabric legally this morning." "The fabric, yes. What was hidden inside it, no." "Then show me proof and contact the police." A faint change crossed his face. "Surprise, perhaps. The police cannot protect this shop from what will come looking for it." People usually say that when they do not want the police asking questions. The mark on Rachel's wrist pulsed, the lights dimmed. Alessandro's eyes flashed silver. "You opened a seal that no ordinary person should have recognized." "I opened a seam. No ordinary seamstress could have done it." Rachel held his gaze. "I am not ordinary at my job." Silence settled between them. Rain touched the windows. The old heater rattled near the wall. Alessandro's attention shifted to Eleanor's sewing machine. He saw the needle and moon symbol carved into its wooden base and went completely still. "Where did you get that?" "It belonged to my grandmother." "What was her name?" Rachel's caution sharpened. "Why?" "Because that symbol appears in records someone tried very hard to erase." "Her name was Eleanor Morgan." Alessandro looked at the carving as though it had opened a door into a past he had buried. "I met her once." Rachel's breath caught. "My grandmother never mentioned you. She did not know me as Alessandro Romano." "Then what name did she know?" Before he could answer, the crown gave one heavy thump beneath the silk. The windows trembled. Alessandro turned toward the back of the shop, listening to something Rachel could not hear. "Others have felt it now," he said. "Others like you?" "Not all of them." A soft scrape sounded in the alley behind the building. Rachel glanced toward the rear door. Alessandro remained where she had told him to stop. "You shall stay," he said, "but this place is no longer hidden, or you may come with me. Keep the crown in your possession and demand every answer I have." Rachel looked at the dark street, the waiting guards, and the glowing mark on her wrist. "You are not taking the crown." "I did not say I was. And I am not your prisoner." "You are not." The crown struck again. Thump. A second symbol glowed beneath the silk, and a wave of pressure moved through the room without wind or sound. Outside, every guard dropped to one knee at the same moment. Rachel stared through the window. "Why are they kneeling?" Alessandro did not kneel, but uncertainty entered his silver eyes for the first time. "They are not kneeling to you," he said carefully. "They are answering the crown." Rachel looked down as the mark on her wrist grew brighter. "Then why is it answering me?" Alessandro's gaze settled on her, no longer cold, no longer certain. "That," he said, "is the question someone erased 3 centuries ago." Rachel looked toward the rear door as another careful scrape passed through the alley behind Morgan Alterations. Alessandro's attention shifted before the sound had fully faded. His posture did not change, but the air around him seemed to tighten. "How long do I have to decide?" Rachel asked. Not long enough for comfort, he replied. She looked around the shop her grandmother had built one stitch at a time, the old brass lamp, the unfinished coat beneath the sewing machine. The 3 overdue bills beside the register. Leaving felt like abandoning the only place that still belonged to her. Staying felt like trusting whoever waited beyond the back door. Rachel wrapped the crown in its black silk, placed it inside the heavy canvas bag she used for valuable closed. I lock the shop, she said. I carry the crown, no one searches the bag, and I decide when I leave your car. Alessandro gave a single nod. Agreed. You agree very easily. You have asked for reasonable things. The rear doorknob turned a fraction of an inch. Rachel's breath caught. Alessandro moved between her and the hallway without touching her. His silver eyes darkened, and the lights above the cutting table flickered. Lock the front door, he said. His voice remained quiet, yet every guard outside rose at once. Rachel turned off the sewing machine, pulled on her coat, and secured the canvas bag against her side. She checked the back room, set the alarm, and stepped into the rain. One guard opened the rear door of the middle car. Rachel stopped when she saw the darkened windows. Lower them. The guard looked toward Alessandro. Do it, Alessandro said. The glass descended, revealing the street through the opposite side. Rachel entered with the bag on her lap. Alessandro sat several feet away, leaving the space between them untouched. The 3 cars pulled from the curb. Morgan alterations vanished behind a curtain of rain. Start explaining, Rachel said. Alessandro watched the city light slide across the window. The crown disappeared 300 years ago, on the night my wife died. Rachel had expected another riddle. The directness unsettled her more. Your wife, Isabella. His voice softened around the name. She removed the crown from the royal court because she believed someone intended to use it against me. Against you how? By challenging my right to rule. Rachel studied his pale reflection. Royal court, right to rule. Are you going to tell me what you are? Alessandro turned toward her. A vampire. He spoke the word without drama, and for more than 600 years I have ruled the 12 bloodhouses. Rachel thought of his silver eyes, the kneeling guards, and the impossible pulse inside the crown. So you are a vampire king? Yes, she waited for panic. Instead, practical questions arrived first. Do the police know vampires exist? Certain officials know enough to prevent public danger. Did my grandmother know? I cannot answer that yet. You said you met her. 32 years ago, she restored a ceremonial banner from my private collection. She introduced herself as Eleanor Hale. Rachel tightened her grip on the bag. Hale had been Eleanor's maiden name. Why did she hide the Morgan name? I did not know she had. Did she mention this crown? No. Alessandro held her gaze. Had she done so, I would not have spent 3 centuries searching for it. The crown gave a muted thump inside the bag. Alessandro's fingers closed against the edge of the seat. Rachel, it affects you. It was bound to me during my coronation. Then why did it answer me? I do not know. His reply came without hesitation. That is the truth. The convoy left downtown road through the wooded hills north of Blackridge. Lightning revealed the outline of Romano Hall above the trees, nearly 20 miles from the city. It looked less like a home than a shadow cut from stone. What happens during the eclipse? Rachel asked. Alessandro looked toward the distant estate. The crown does not keep me alive, and it does not create my power. It confirms the legitimacy of the throne. I have ruled without it under a temporary law maintained by the 12 houses. For 300 years, temporary means something different to creatures who measure life in centuries, and in 3 nights, the lunar eclipse begins a mandatory confirmation of the throne. Without the crown, the council may remove me. Rachel heard what he had not said. That is not the part you are afraid of. A trace of red surfaced in his eyes, then vanished. No, the lead car slowed. 2 figures stood across the road beneath the trees. Black mist spread between them, covering the pavement like a curtain and hiding the way forward. It did not erase the road. It blocked the drivers from seeing it. Alessandro leaned toward the front seat. Vain scouts. The name was unfamiliar to Rachel, but the contempt beneath his calm was not. They followed us. They followed the crown. The guards stepped from the cars and formed a silent line. Alessandro opened his door, then paused when Rachel caught the sleeve of his coat. You promised answers. He looked at her hand, then at her face, and he stepped into the rain. The crown struck once inside Rachel's bag. The mark on her wrist flared white. Across the road, every figure beneath the black mist turned toward her. The figures beneath the black mist remained still, watching Rachel through the rain as though the light on her wrist had revealed something they had not expected to find. Alessandro stood between her and the road, his guards forming a quiet line beside the cars. "Stay close to the door," he said. Rachel did not move farther than a few feet from the vehicle. The mark on her wrist had tightened the moment the barrier appeared, pulling beneath her skin like a thread drawn through cloth. "The mist is connected to the crown," she said. Alessandro kept his eyes on the two distant figures. "It carries the signature of House Vane. That does not prove Cassian ordered this, but someone trained by his family created it." The black mist thickened until the headlights became pale circles with no road beyond them. Rachel looked carefully. Lightning flashed above the trees, and for an instant she saw thin strands crossing through the darkness. Loops. Knots, a repeating pattern. "It is constructed like a seam," she whispered. Alessandro glanced at her. "Can you break it?" "No, I can only see where the pattern closes, and only because this mark is reacting to it." She pointed toward the left edge of the mist. "There is an outer loop there. If you pull the wrong strand, the whole pattern may tighten. Then tell me which one." Alessandro lifted one hand. A faint silver light formed around his fingers. Rachel watched the shifting lines until a narrow strand passed beneath two darker loops. "That one. Pull it sideways, not toward you." He followed her instruction. The barrier trembled. The figures beneath the trees took one step back. "Now the lower loop," Rachel said. "Turn it clockwise. Do not break it." Alessandro twisted his hand. The mist loosened like fabric released from a hidden knot. A clear path opened down the middle of the road. His guards moved forward only far enough to secure the cars. They did not pursue when the Vane scouts disappeared among the trees. "Why let them leave?" Rachel asked as she returned to the car. "Because they came to observe," Alessandro said. "If we capture them, whoever sent them learns exactly what we know. Now they only know the crown awakened and their barrier failed. They also saw me. They saw a human carrying it. They do not yet know why it answered you." Rachel looked at the silver mark fading beneath her skin. "Neither do I." The convoy continued through the hills. 10 minutes later, iron gates opened ahead of them, revealing Romano Hall beyond a long drive lined with bare trees. The stone estate rose against the storm, its tall windows glowing with low golden light. Rachel kept the canvas bag on her lap. Inside it rested the wrapped crown and the narrow section of velvet she had cut from the curtain before leaving her shop. She had brought the fabric because the hidden stitching was the only evidence connecting the crown to Eleanor. When Rachel entered the main hall, only 3 people waited beneath a chandelier of black glass. An older man in a charcoal suit bowed to Alessandro. Beside him stood a silver-haired woman whose expression sharpened when she saw Rachel. A thin scholar held an ancient leather ledger against his chest. "The archive room is prepared," the older man said. Alessandro looked at all 3 of them. "Miss Morgan remains the crown's temporary custodian. No one touches it without her permission." The silver-haired woman stiffened. "My king, it is royal property. Its legal status will be determined after we understand why it responded to her." Rachel noticed the precision of his answer. He was honoring their agreement without declaring that the crown belonged to her. Alessandro led her through a corridor lit by small brass lamps. The circular archive room beyond was filled with sealed books, rolled banners, glass cases, and cabinets bearing dates older than the United States. Rachel placed the bag on a broad oak table. She removed the silk-wrapped crown first, then unfolded the strip of black velvet beside it. The scholar approached but stopped 2 feet from the table. "May I examine it?" he asked. Rachel nodded. He leaned closer without touching. The surviving drawings show no symbol beneath the inner rim. Rachel turned the crown carefully. The needle and moon mark remained, but thin silver lines now extended from it like embroidery. The same lines shimmered across the velvet. The scholar saw only scattered shapes. Rachel saw structure, straight stitches, crossed threads, double knots, a broken seam. "My grandmother taught me that patterns carry meaning," she said. "A straight line reveals, a crossed line conceals. A double knot binds a promise." The silver-haired woman folded her arms. "And the broken stitch?" Rachel touched the edge of the velvet. The mark on her wrist brightened, allowing her to see one short sequence while the rest remained dark. "It means an oath was broken." The crown pulsed once beneath her other hand. Silver light traveled through the fabric and formed a single sentence. The scholar could not read it. Alessandro watched Rachel instead of the crown. "What does it say?" She followed the glowing stitches slowly, refusing to guess at the sections that remained sealed. "The crown does not belong to the strongest king." Silence filled the archive. "There is more," Alessandro said. "Only one line," Rachel replied. "The rest is still locked." She read the final words as they appeared beneath her fingertips. "It belongs to the one the keeper is willing to confirm." The scholar's face lost its color. The silver-haired woman stepped away from the table. Alessandro remained motionless. But something ancient and uncertain entered his eyes. Keeper, he repeated. That word was removed from every complete royal record 3 centuries ago. The word keeper remained suspended in the archive long after the silver sentence faded from the velvet. Rachel watched Alessandro carefully. He did not look surprised by the existence of the title. He looked disturbed by how little he understood it. "You have seen that word before," she said. "Only in damaged records," Alessandro replied. "A witness at coronations, a guardian of royal law." Every complete explanation vanished after Isabella died. The thin scholar opened his leather ledger and searched through several brittle pages. "There are references to human advisors," he said. "Their names were removed. Their duties were reduced to ceremonial language." Lady Seraphine Vale, the silver-haired council representative, folded her hands before her. Or the title never carried real authority. Ancient courts often decorated ordinary service with impressive names. Rachel ignored the dismissal. One knot on the velvet still held a faint silver glow. She leaned closer. "The message is not finished." Alessandro remained across the table. "What do you need?" "A steady restoration lamp. No candlelight." The scholar brought one from a nearby cabinet. Rachel opened the small sewing kit she had carried from her shop and selected a narrow needle. She threaded it with a loose strand from the original black silk wrapping. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. "You intend to sew into the crown?" "No, I am tracing the spaces the old thread left behind." Rachel passed the needle above the velvet without piercing it. Across beneath, turn, release. The motions felt familiar, yet the pattern beneath them did not. The mark on her wrist brightened. Silver lines spread slowly across the fabric, forming the outline of a woman in a long dark gown. A narrow crown rested above her hair. Alessandro went completely still. "Isabella," he whispered. The preserved image lifted its face. Her features were calm, but fear lived behind her eyes. "If this memory has opened," she said, "then the crown has reached hands connected to the trust that once stood between the throne and absolute power." Rachel lowered the needle. Isabella continued. "The royal bond has been corrupted from within the council. I do not yet know the method, only that someone is preparing the king to fail when the throne is judged again." Alessandro's gaze hardened. She knew before she disappeared. The memory shifted, revealing 12 shadowed seats around a black table. "I removed the crown so no false ruler could claim legitimacy through a broken law," Isabella said. "I placed it beyond the reach of the traitor. His authority comes from the council." The silver image flickered. Crossed stitches appeared over her mouth. The final word vanished. Then the entire memory collapsed into darkness. Alessandro placed his hands on the edge of the table without touching the crown. "Can you reopen it?" "Not yet," Rachel said. "That section was covered deliberately. I would need to understand the locking pattern before I could trace it safely." "Who covered it?" Seraphine asked. Rachel studied the cross thread. "Someone who understood this system. That does not tell us who." A tall man entered with 2 council attendants behind him. His pale hair was combed neatly back, and a dark red tie rested beneath his black coat. Alessandro straightened. "Cassian Vane." Cassian looked first at the crown, then at Rachel. "The reports were accurate," he said. "A human opened the lost seal." "Miss Morgan came here willingly," Alessandro replied. "She remains the crown's temporary custodian until its response to her is understood." Cassian's expression stayed polite. "A generous interpretation. The Eclipse statute requires unrecognized holders of royal regalia to surrender it for council examination. Does that law exist to protect the crown?" Rachel asked, "or to remove it from anyone the council does not control?" Cassian turned toward her. "The statute predates both of us. Then I would like to read it before anyone uses it against me." A trace of surprise passed through Seraphine's face. Cassian reached inside his coat and placed a folded legal document on the table. "You may read it while the crown is secured." "It stays where it is," Alessandro said. The room cooled around his words. Cassian glanced toward the velvet. "Whatever message appeared here should be considered unverified evidence." Rachel watched him carefully. "Your scouts used an unusual binding on the road. Housevane techniques are widely copied. The locking loop crossed itself twice before turning inward." Cassian answered too quickly. "A triple cross binding, effective when properly closed." Silence followed. Rachel had never spoken that name. Neither had Alessandro. Cassian seemed to recognize his mistake, but his expression did not change. Knowledge of the pattern did not prove he had sent the scouts. It only proved his connection to the method was deeper than he wished to admit. The hidden thread beneath Isabella's interrupted message began to glow again. It did not point toward Cassian. It curved toward the table and stopped beneath the document he had brought. A crossed stitch formed directly under the council seal. Rachel looked from the mark to the folded statute. "The Crown is not accusing a person," she said quietly. "It is reacting to something concealed in that law." Cassian's calm finally cracked, only slightly. But Alessandro saw it, so did Rachel. The crossed stitch beneath the council seal glowed for 3 seconds, then vanished into the velvet. Cassian Vane stared at the folded statute as though the document had spoken against him. "Ancient magic is unreliable," he said. "Or it notices what people prefer to hide," Rachel replied. Lady Seraphine reached for the paper, but Alessandro placed his hand over it first. "The statute remains here until Miss Morgan has read it." Cassian's expression hardened. "You would suspend council procedure for a human seamstress." "She requested due process," Alessandro said. "The law will survive being questioned." Rachel watched Cassian closely. He had arrived prepared to control the room. Now every answer seemed to narrow it around him. "The eclipse begins in 3 nights, he warned Alessandro. "Delay will not protect your throne. Then stop creating delays." Cassian turned toward the archive doors. "The council expects a formal response before sunrise." "It will receive one." Cassian left with his attendants. Seraphine gathered the scholar's written notes but did not touch the crown or velvet. "I will compare this copy of the statute with the sealed council version," she said. Her skepticism remained, but uncertainty had entered it. "No one should assume the document was altered without proof." "Agreed," Rachel said, "but no one should assume it was preserved honestly either." Seraphine gave her a long look, then followed Cassian into the corridor. When the doors closed, Alessandro ordered the scholar to photograph every visible stitch and create 2 written copies of Isabella's message. Rachel kept several loose strands from the original silk in her sewing kit. Even if the velvet disappeared, it would not return to nothing. It was after 1 in the morning when Alessandro led her to a smaller library across the hall. A fire burned behind a glass screen. Rain moved softly against the tall windows. On a round table sat a brass key, a leather folder, and a thick envelope. Rachel stopped. "A choice," Alessandro said. He indicated the key. "It opens the east gate and a car outside. You may leave whenever you decide." He touched the folder next. "This contains the balance on your commercial loan, your utility debt, and the date of the bank review." Rachel's expression cooled. "You investigated my finances. My staff confirmed your identity. Without permission." "Yes." Alessandro rested his fingers beside the envelope. "There is enough money here to clear every debt and keep your shop open for a year. You may take it, leave the crown under protected custody, and return to Blackridge." Rachel looked at the money, then at him. "This is not an offer, it is a test. It is also a way out. You placed everything I am afraid of losing beside the thing you want most. Then you waited to see which one I would choose." Alessandro did not answer. He did not need to. Rachel opened the folder. Every figure was correct, including an overdue payment to a fabric supplier in Boston. Her private life had been reduced to columns of black ink. She closed the folder and pushed it across the table. The envelope followed. "You could have asked whether I could be bought. People often lie when asked directly, then decide whether to trust me. Do not build a trap and call it freedom." The fire shifted behind the glass. Alessandro's pale face remained controlled, but shame entered his eyes. "You are right." Rachel had expected an argument. The admission stopped her. "That does not make this acceptable." "No, it does not." He moved the folder and money away. "Your financial records will be destroyed, and no further investigation will be made without your permission." Rachel picked up the brass key and placed it in her coat pocket. "I am keeping this. You should. I am also keeping the crown. That remains our agreement, and I am staying until I understand what Eleanor hid from me." Alessandro studied her. "Why stay after what I just did?" Rachel thought of the vain scouts, the altered statute, and Isabella's broken message. "Because leaving does not make my shop safe. Because someone erased my grandmother's work. Because Cassian expected me to be frightened, paid, or silenced. And because Alessandro's gaze. I want to know whether it can be mended." His expression softened without strategy behind it. "I owe you an apology, Rachel Morgan. More than one. Then I will begin with this." He lowered his head, not as a king addressing a subject, as a man accepting fault. "I am sorry." A quiet knock interrupted them. Marcus entered carrying Rachel's canvas bag with both hands. He stopped several feet away and offered it to her without opening it. "The internal archive seal registered an authorized breach," he said. "I found the bag untouched, but the velvet was missing. I brought everything directly to Miss Morgan." Rachel accepted the bag and checked the silk-wrapped crown herself. It remained inside. Her sewing kit and preserved threads were also there. Only the strip of black velvet had vanished. In its place lay a short length of red thread tied into a triple-cross knot. Alessandro's eyes turned cold. An authorized breach means someone inside this house disabled the seal. Marcus lowered his gaze. Yes, my king. Rachel lifted the red knot beneath the library lamp. This does not prove Cassian entered the archive. No, Alessandro said. It proves someone here wants us to think of House Vane. Marcus looked toward the dark corridor beyond the door. Hidden beneath his cuff, a second red thread tightened around his wrist. Marcus lowered his gaze as the hidden red thread tightened beneath his cuff. Rachel noticed only the brief movement of his hand, as though something had pulled against his wrist. Alessandro followed her attention. Marcus, he said quietly, show me your arm. The older man remained still. Rain pressed softly against the library windows. The fire behind the glass gave one low crackle. Marcus said, there are facts you do not yet understand. Alessandro's face became unreadable. Then explain them. Marcus slowly drew back his sleeve. A red thread circled his wrist 3 times. Crossing itself in the same triple knot pattern Rachel had found inside the canvas bag. It did not rest on his skin like ordinary fiber. It seemed woven beneath the surface, glowing faintly with every beat of his pulse. Rachel stepped closer but stopped several feet away. Marcus nodded, an oath tied to another life. Alessandro's silver eyes darkened. Whose? My sister's, Helena. Marcus looked toward the floor. Cassian gave the order 6 weeks ago. I heard his voice. I saw his signet, but I cannot prove he was not using another man as his messenger. Where is Helena? Alessandro asked. She was held on Vane land, 35 miles north of here, an abandoned chapel near the old quarry. The binding tightens whenever I resist an instruction. If I break it completely, the inner strand transfers the punishment to her. Alessandro did not raise his voice. That made the cold in the room feel sharper. You disabled the archive seal, only the outer layer. Someone already inside Romano Hall used a council veil to enter the service passage. I never saw a face. I did not touch the crown. Rachel lifted the red knot that had been left in her bag. This was proof that you completed the order. And a warning, Marcus said. I brought the bag directly to you because it was the only way I could reveal the breach without speaking against the oath. Alessandro took one step toward him, then stopped. Anger moved through his expression, but it did not become cruelty. You served this house for 112 years. I know what my silence cost. Marcus's voice remained steady, though the red thread brightened beneath his skin. I also know what open defiance would cost Helena. Rachel studied the knot. 3 crossings. One strand pulled inward. The outer strand remained slightly loose. The mark on her wrist appeared like silver thread beneath her skin. The structure resembles the road barrier, she said. I can see the loops because the spell was built like a seam. I cannot remove it. And I cannot read magic that has no pattern like this. Alessandro moved beside her. What can you do? Suspend the outer pull for a short time. You must provide the force. Rachel took one pale strand from the silk preserved in her sewing kit and held it above Marcus's wrist without touching him. The outside loop controls Marcus. The inside loop reaches Helena. If we break either one, the other tightens. Alessandro raised his hand. Silver light gathered around his fingers. Then we loosen it. Rachel guided the pale strand over the first crossing, beneath the second, and through the narrow opening between the 2 bindings. Turn the outer strand counterclockwise, slowly, do not pull. Alessandro followed the motion exactly. The red thread trembled. Marcus released a careful breath. Again, Rachel said, only half a turn. The knot loosened by less than an inch, and its glow dimmed. It is suspended, she said, perhaps for 2 hours. Whoever controls it may still believe the oath is active unless they examine it directly. Marcus looked toward Alessandro. If Cassian feels the disturbance, he will expect us at the chapel. Then the chapel is a trap, Rachel said. Yes, Marcus replied. Alessandro may no longer be there. We will not approach as a royal convoy. I will take a small team by a separate route. He looked at Rachel. You are not required to come. If Helena is bound by the same pattern, you need someone who can identify the safe loop. The risk is considerable, so is guessing. The old instinct to command entered Alessandro's eyes, then receded. You remain beside me and leave the moment I tell you the structure has changed. That is reasonable. Marcus handed a secure phone to one of the guards outside and quietly transmitted the chapel's coordinates to a reserve team ordered to remain 5 miles away unless summoned. Alessandro, Rachel, and Marcus left through a service tunnel beneath Romano Hall and entered an unmarked grey sedan. Rachel did not scatter thread along the road. Instead, at 3 major turns, she tied small knots of preserved silver silk around sheltered signposts. The threads reacted to the mark on her wrist and would remain visible to her even through rain. Nearly 90 minutes later, the sedan stopped beyond a line of bare trees. The abandoned chapel stood on a low hill, its stone walls dark beneath the fading storm. No lights burned within. Marcus stepped out first, the binding under his cuff pulsed once. "He knows," Rachel whispered. The chapel doors opened before anyone touched them. Cassian Vane stood in the shadowed entrance with the stolen velvet folded across one arm. Behind him hung a tall mirror filled with moving silver light. Helena was nowhere in sight. The image inside the glass showed Alessandro on the night Isabella died. He knelt beside her motionless form, his hands stained dark, his face hidden beneath falling black hair. Cassian looked directly at Rachel. "You wanted the missing truth," he said. "Now decide whether your king deserves to survive it." The silver image in the mirror showed Alessandro kneeling beside Isabella, his hands darkened. His shoulders bowed beneath the weight of a moment the glass refused to explain. Rachel felt the crown pulse inside her canvas bag. Once, twice. Not with recognition, with warning. Cassian stepped aside so she could see the memory clearly. "He told the court he found her this way," he said. "He never told them what happened before." Alessandro remained near the chapel entrance. He did not deny the image. He did not move toward Cassian. "The memory has been altered," he said. "Of course you would say that," Cassian replied. Rachel kept her attention on the mirror. "Let it continue." Alessandro looked at her, but whatever answer he wanted to give remained unspoken. Cassian lifted one hand. The scene moved. A man wearing Alessandro's face crossed Isabella's chamber. The image flickered at the edges. Isabella turned toward him with fear in her eyes. Rachel ignored the face and studied the clothing. The black ceremonial coat carried the royal crest, but the stitching along the sleeve was wrong. 3 narrow lines crossed beneath a red inner seam, the same structure she had seen in the vein barrier, the same triple cross pattern tied around Marcus's wrist. "Stop the memory," Rachel said. Cassian smiled faintly. "Afraid of what comes next? Stop it." Her voice cut through the chapel. Cassian hesitated, then froze the image. Rachel pointed toward the sleeve. "That coat was altered." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "It bears the royal crest." The crest was sewn over another design. Rachel opened her kit and removed one pale strand of preserved silk. The mark on her wrist brightened as she held it near the mirror. Silver lines appeared across the image, revealing hidden joins beneath the finished scene. "The face, the clothing, and the room were taken from different moments," she said. "This memory was assembled." Cassian's calm thinned. "You repair garments, you do not judge memories." "False seams are false seams." Rachel traced the air above the figure's shoulder. The image split for less than a second. Beneath Alessandro's face appeared pale hair, a narrow jaw, and a dark red collar marked with house Vane stitching. Marcus drew a careful breath. Someone from Vane wore the king's face. Rachel did not look away from the glass. "That proves Alessandro was impersonated. It does not yet prove who stood beneath the illusion." Cassian's eyes sharpened. Alessandro's expression held pain, but not surprise. "I remember Isabella calling for me," he said. "I remember finding the chamber sealed." "The next hour exists only in fragments. Convenient, deliberate," Rachel replied. She looked at the stolen velvet folded across his arm. "You needed the original fabric because it contains the unbroken record. The mirror can display a stitched copy, but the cloth still carries the clean pattern." Cassian's fingers tightened around it. The crown pulsed again inside Rachel's bag. Marcus suddenly gripped his wrist. The red binding beneath his cuff had begun to glow. "The suspension is failing," Rachel said. Alessandro moved beside him. "Where is her answer?" But his eyes shifted once toward a narrow wooden door behind the altar. Alessandro saw it. So did Rachel. He lifted one hand. The lock clicked open without damage. Beyond the door, a stairway descended beneath the chapel. Thin red lines crossed the first stone step. Rachel studied them, the same binding structure. Part 7 loosened Marcus's outer loop. "If Helena carries the matching inner loop, this is why we can reach her now." Alessandro held silver light above Marcus's wrist, keeping the weakened knot from tightening. Rachel guided Marcus around the sealed steps, one careful turn at a time. At the bottom, they found Helena seated inside a circle of red silk, frightened but unharmed. The pattern beneath her chair matched Marcus's binding exactly. "Cassian is no longer feeding power into it," Rachel said. "That gives us one chance." She directed Alessandro to rotate the controlling strand while she guided the pale silk through the opening they had already created. The red loops loosened. The light beneath both siblings' skin faded. Marcus knelt beside Helena, relief breaking through his disciplined expression. Above them, a deep metallic sound shook the chapel. Cassian had spread the stolen velvet across the altar and pressed both hands above its center. A red light rose from the cloth like a reflection pulled free from glass. At the same moment, the largest stone in Rachel's crown went dark inside the bag. The mirror and velvet were linked to the crown through the original seal. Cassian was not removing the physical stone. He was drawing out its magical core. Rachel hurried back up the stairs as the red light entered the mirror. "The cloth is the bridge," she said. "The mirror is pulling the core through it." Cassian stepped into the silver surface. "The frame may remain with you," he said, "but without the heart it cannot judge anyone." The prepared mirror gate folded inward around him. It could open only to one fixed destination and only once. The silver surface collapsed, leaving an empty frame behind. Cassian, the stolen velvet fell across the altar. Its center burned pale and empty. Rachel opened the canvas bag. The crown remained intact, but the largest red stone had become clear and lifeless. Alessandro looked from the hollow jewel to the vanished mirror. "He cannot complete a coronation with the core alone," he said. "And we cannot complete the crown without it," Rachel answered. Grey light entered through the chapel windows. Dawn had arrived. Rachel lifted the weakened crown in both hands. "He did not bring us here to prove you killed Isabella." Alessandro watched the empty mirror frame. "No, he brought us here because he needed the cloth, the mirror, and the awakened crown in the same place." The clear stone gave one final, silent flicker. "He came for the part that makes the crown speak." By the time Rachel, Alessandro, Marcus, and Helena returned to Romano Hall, morning had settled over the rain-dark hills of Massachusetts. No one had slept. The council was already assembled inside the great chamber, summoned by a message Cassian had sent before they left the chapel grounds. 12 high-backed seats formed a circle around the black stone floor. Lady Seraphine stood beside the central table with the sealed copy of the Eclipse statute in her hands. Cassian's chair was empty. That absence felt deliberate. Rachel entered, carrying the crown frame inside her canvas bag. Every eye followed her, some with suspicion, some with contempt, a few with fear. Alessandro walked beside her, not ahead. Marcus and Helena remained near the doors under formal guard. Marcus had surrendered his command the moment they returned and requested an investigation into his own actions. Helena had agreed to testify. The council was informed that Lord Vane recovered the royal core from unlawful human custody, said a dark-haired councilman. Rachel set the canvas bag on the central table. "That is false. He used the stolen velvet and a prepared mirror gate to draw the core out of the crown without my consent." A low murmur moved through the chamber. "You speak as though consent governs royal property," another noble said. Rachel met his gaze. "It governs me." Silence and Seraphine opened the sealed statute. "The law recognizes no human custodian unless the council confirms that authority." "Then compare the law you sealed with the version Cassian carried," Rachel said. The crown reacted to concealment beneath his document. "Old magic is not legal proof." "Then use ordinary proof." Helena stepped forward. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. She described the abandoned chapel, the red binding, Cassian's signet, and the instructions delivered through the oath tied to Marcus. Marcus then admitted that he had disabled the archive's outer seal under coercion. He did not ask to be excused. "I opened the passage," he said. "I did not touch the crown. I accept judgment for what I did." The dark-haired councilman turned toward Alessandro. "Your own commander betrayed this house." "Under threat to another life," Alessandro replied. "He will answer for his actions, but this council will not erase coercion because it complicates the verdict." Several nobles exchanged uneasy looks. Lady Seraphine placed the sealed statute beside Cassian's copy. "The wording differs in 3 places," she said. The public version grants immediate seizure of royal regalia. The sealed version requires a hearing before any transfer. The chamber broke into whispers. Rachel looked at the 2 documents. "Then someone changed the law, or one copy is ceremonial," a councilwoman argued. "The seals and ink will be examined," Seraphine said. "Until then, neither version can be enforced without review." Rachel removed the crown frame from the bag and placed it on the table. The largest red stone remained physically present, but it had become clear and lifeless since Cassian drew out its magical core. A thin silver line moved beneath the dark metal. "The frame is still responding," the scholar said from the edge of the chamber. "It retains memory and principle," Rachel replied. "But without the royal core, it cannot complete a judgment." A woman in deep blue looked Rachel over slowly. "You are a seamstress from a failing shop. Why should this court trust your interpretation of symbols older than your country?" Rachel did not lower her gaze. "Because your scholars studied them for centuries and could not read the first sentence. I could." "Because of your blood?" the woman asked. "We can test it." Rachel's hand tightened beside the crown. Before she answered, Alessandro rose. No one takes her blood without her permission. The councilwoman turned toward him. You would risk the throne for a human stranger? Alessandro's expression became perfectly still. I would risk it for the principle that power does not erase choice. The mark on Rachel's wrist warmed. A silver sentence formed along the inner rim of the crown frame. Only she could read it. The worthy ruler is not the one who claims every right, she said. Alessandro watched her. Continue. Rachel followed the glowing pattern. It is the one who knows which rights are not his to take. A restrained royal pulse moved through the chamber. The guards lowered their heads, not to Rachel or Alessandro, but to the law preserved in the frame. Lady Seraphine closed both copies of the statute. A formal hearing will begin at the opening of the eclipse. Miss Morgan retains temporary custody of the crown frame. Lord Vane is ordered to appear with the missing royal core. A door opened on the upper gallery. Cassian stepped through with 2 council witnesses behind him, proving he had not been hiding there during the testimony. In his hands rested a crystal case filled with red light. The royal core. I am here, he said. And I arrived before them because the chapel mirror opened to a fixed council chamber prepared decades ago. The gate has collapsed. It cannot be used again. Alessandro's guards moved toward the gallery, but Seraphine raised one hand. He remains a council lord until formally charged. Cassian looked down at Rachel. You have heard testimony. Now hear the law the keepers concealed. He raised the crystal case. The core projected ancient symbols across the chamber wall. The core only repeats what was written into it, Rachel said. It does not prove the writing is true. Then read it, Cassian replied. The council fell silent. The translated words appeared beneath the symbols. The keeper's blood shall complete the crown. Rachel studied the pattern and felt something wrong immediately. One symbol had been cut through the middle, changing the path of the line. Cassian smiled as though the verdict had already been decided. There will be no completed crown, he said, without a sacrifice. Rachel did not look at Cassian. She's symbols projected across the council chamber wall. One line had been cut through the center, changing the path of the final stitch. The translation is wrong, she said. Cassian held the crystal case above the gallery railing, red light moving between his pale fingers. The royal core has preserved that law for centuries. It preserved what someone placed inside it, not what the original pattern meant. Rachel opened her sewing kit and removed the pale silk saved from Eleanor's wrapping. She held it beneath the damaged symbol. The mark on her wrist brightened, revealing the faint curve that should have returned through the center. Lady Seraphine stepped closer. What do you see? 2 symbols made from the same foundation, Rachel said. One means blood, the other means truth. Cut the returning line and truth becomes blood. The council scholar hurried forward with an ancient language ledger. He compared both forms under the restoration lamp, then looked up in disbelief. She is correct. The original mark requires a completed return. Cassian's expression remained calm, a convenient interpretation from the woman whose life depends upon it. Then do not trust me, Rachel replied. Trust the construction. She guided the pale thread through the air, following the missing curve. The projected sentence flickered. The word blood dissolved. Truth appeared in its place. The keeper's truth shall complete the crown. Silence swept through the chamber. Alessandro's gaze remained fixed on the corrected law. There was never a sacrifice, he said. There was a public judgment, Rachel answered. Cassian lowered the crystal case slightly. One damaged symbol does not invalidate centuries of law. Rachel turned toward him. It explains why every keeper was taught that completing the crown required death. How many disappeared because your council preserved a lie? No one answered. Lady Seraphine opened the sealed statute again. The oldest records say the keepers died during confirmation. The records say they vanished, Rachel replied. Later copies decided what that meant. The crown frame pulsed on the table. A new pattern appeared beneath its inner rim. Straight silver lines formed a continuous path, interrupted at regular intervals by dark triple-cross stitches. Rachel leaned closer. This is not coronation language. Alessandro approached slowly. What is it? A record connected to your royal bond. She traced the earliest interruption without touching the metal. The first corruption began 300 years ago. The frame recorded repeated interference until Isabella removed it. Then the crown did not cause my decline, Alessandro said. No, it stopped witnessing it. The royal physician stepped forward only after Alessandro gave permission. He passed a silver instrument above the king's wrist. Dark lines appeared beneath the light, matching the pattern inside the frame. Sustained contamination, the physician said. Renewed many times. How? Marcus asked from beside the guarded doors. The physician looked toward the ceremonial reserve stored beneath the council floor, through something administered regularly. Lady Seraphine ordered the keeper of the royal stores to bring the preserved samples and delivery ledger. The man returned with a sealed vial and record spanning decades. Every ceremonial shipment carried approval from House Vane oversight. Cassian's voice hardened. Oversight is not guilt. No, Rachel said. It is a trail. The physician placed the sample beneath the testing lamp. A dark thread appeared inside the liquid, twisting into the same triple-cross structure used in the vein bindings. Shocked voices rose around the chamber. The scholar searched the ledger. The pattern renews after each council confirmation ceremony. Alessandro's eyes turned red for one brief moment, then silver again. The final dose was already given during the last rite. The physician nodded grimly. It has remained inactive, waiting for the conditions of the eclipse. Guards moved toward the gallery, surrounding every exit. Seraphine looked at Cassian. Your council immunity is suspended pending examination. Cassian raised the royal core before they could reach him. Red light burst across the ceiling. The windows darkened, but Rachel could still see ordinary morning beyond the glass. The sun had not vanished. A dome of shadow had formed only over Romano Hall. This is not the eclipse, she said. It is an imitation, Cassian smiled. The body does not know the difference. The royal core projected false lunar conditions through the ancient wards. The dormant corruption inside Alessandro answered. He gripped the edge of the table as the dark lines beneath his skin brightened. His balance failed, and he lowered himself to one knee beside the crown frame. He remained conscious, his breathing slowed by deliberate effort. His eyes fixed on Rachel, then moved away from the pulse in her wrist. Cassian watched from behind the red light. You discovered the poison, he said, but the final dose was designed to awaken before you could remove it. Alessandro forced his voice steady. If restoring the crown requires anything Rachel does not freely choose, I surrender the throne. The chamber fell silent again. Rachel saw no strategy in his face, no hidden test, only a decision. You would allow Cassian to claim it, she asked. I will not purchase power with your life. The crown frame answered with a deep silver pulse. New words formed along its inner rim. The keeper's truth is testimony freely given. Rachel looked at the altered statute, the contaminated ceremonial vial. Marcus and Helena standing beneath guard, and the royal core Cassian had turned into a weapon. She finally understood. The crown did not need her blood. It needed an unbroken public record of the betrayal, spoken before every house and accepted without coercion. She placed both hands beside the frame. Then listen carefully, she said, because I'm going to tell this court exactly what was hidden. Cassian tightened his grip on the core. The false eclipse deepened. Alessandro's eyes flashed red again, but he did not move toward Rachel. He lowered his head, fighting the corruption with every controlled breath. For the first time, fear entered Cassian's face. The poison had awakened. The king had not obeyed it. Rachel placed both hands beside the crown frame and faced the 12 bloodhouses. The false eclipse pressed against Romano Hall, darkening the windows while ordinary morning remained visible beyond the magical dome. Alessandro stayed on one knee beside the table. His eyes burned red, but his hands remained open and still. He did not reach for Rachel. He did not reach for the crown. Cassian stood in the upper gallery with the royal core sealed inside its crystal case, while guards blocked every exit around him. Speak carefully, he warned. One false statement will end the judgment. Rachel looked up at him. Then you should be afraid. The mark on her wrist brightened. Silver lines spread from the crown frame across the black stone floor, forming a circle around every council seat. I testify that the public eclipse statute was altered. Lady Seraphine placed both versions of the law beneath the restoration lamp. The silver line touched the changed passages and turned white. Confirmed, she said. The crown frame gave one deep pulse. I testify that the law demanding the keeper's blood was created by cutting the symbol for truth. The scholar raised the ancient language ledger, confirmed by the original construction. Another pulse moved through the chamber. Cassian tightened his grip on the crystal case. The Falsandro's breathing faltered, then steadied through deliberate control. Rachel continued, I testify that Isabella removed the crown to prevent a false ruler from being confirmed. The scholar read Isabella's preserved message from the archive notes. The silver circle widened, confirmed. Rachel lifted Eleanor's pale silk thread. I testify that someone wearing Alessandro's face entered Isabella's chamber, while the hidden clothing beneath the illusion carried House Vane construction. Cassian's voice cut through the room. Interpretation is not proof. That is why the evidence was compared, Rachel replied. The same structure appeared in the road barrier. Marcus's binding, Helena's binding, and the altered memory. Marcus stepped forward under guard. Confirmed. Helena stood beside him. Confirmed. The clear stone in the crown frame flickered, answering the distant core. Rachel turned toward the ceremonial vial. I testify that the royal bond was corrupted through repeated council rites. The physician placed the preserved sample beneath his testing lamp. A dark triple-cross pattern appeared inside it. Confirmed. The contamination matches the structure within the king's bond. The silver lines on the floor turned toward Cassian. You have accusations, he said. You do not have judgment. The judgment requires truth accepted without coercion, Rachel replied. She turned toward Alessandro. He remained conscious, though the artificial eclipse forced the dormant corruption through his bond. Red light filled his eyes. His breathing stayed slow, measured, chosen. Alessandro Romano, do you claim the right to take what you need from me to preserve your throne? He lifted his head. No. Do you claim authority above the consent of those you rule? No. Would you surrender the crown rather than harm an innocent person? Yes. The word crossed the chamber with greater force than a command. The crown frame answered with a silver tone. Words formed along its inner rim. The ruler has refused dominion without limit. That is the first condition, Rachel said. The second is whether this court accepts the verified truth freely. Lady Seraphine rose. I recognize the sealed statute as the legitimate law. The scholar stood next. I recognize the corrected translation. The physician followed. I recognize the evidence of sustained contamination. One by one, the council members rose. Some spoke with conviction, others with visible reluctance. Each placed acceptance into the public record. When the final house spoke, the silver circle closed. The royal core shook inside Cassian's case. Stop, he ordered. No one obeyed. A red line stretched between the core and the crown frame. The crystal case opened because the public testimony had completed the ancient recall condition. The core rose from Cassian's hands and crossed the chamber in a line of crimson light. It entered the clear stone at the center of the crown. The jewel became red again. The false eclipse collapsed the moment its power source returned to the frame. Morning flooded the windows. Alessandro drew one deep breath as the immediate pressure inside his bond loosened, though the corruption remained and would still require treatment. He stood slowly. Cassian descended one step, but the guards closed around every path from the gallery. His council immunity was gone. Place the crown on his head, he demanded. Rachel lifted the completed crown but did not move toward Alessandro. Not yet. A final inscription appeared across the chamber wall. The ruler has been tested. The truth has been witnessed. The keeper must now judge the throne. Rachel looked at the 12 houses, then at the man who had chosen her freedom over his crown. The third condition had begun. Rachel held the completed crown between both hands, while the 12 blood houses waited beneath the restored morning light. Alessandro stood beside the central table, pale and exhausted, faint dark lines still visible beneath the skin of his wrist. He did not ask for the crown. He did not tell her what judgment to make. Cassian remained confined in the upper gallery, every exit blocked by council guards. You are a seamstress, he called down. You cannot rebuild 6 centuries of government because an artifact answered you. Rachel looked at the silver pattern forming inside the crown. 3 paths appeared. One led toward Alessandro, one toward Cassian. The third divided into 12 equal lines around the rim. I am not rebuilding the law, she said. I am restoring what your family removed. Lady Seraphine approached the table. 3 possible judgments, she said. Rachel nodded. Confirm the current king, transfer authority to a challenger, or end absolute rule. Uneasy voices rose around the chamber. Cassian gripped the gallery railing. Choose Alessandro and nothing changes. Choose me and the council remains stable. Break the throne and the blood houses will turn against one another. Rachel met his gaze. That is the oldest excuse for unlimited power. The claim that everyone else is too dangerous to share it. She turned toward Alessandro. If I confirm you, will you accept limits no king before you accepted? His silver eyes remained steady. State them. Rachel raised the crown. The throne will remain, but it will stand beneath written law. The council will include independent human representatives chosen by civic, medical, and legal institutions, not appointed by the king. No ancient statute may be enforced from a single copy. No bloodhouse may control its interpretation. The keeper will not serve the throne. The keeper will review it. Several council members protested. Alessandro did not look toward them. Accepted. No command involving human blood, property, memory, or loyalty will be valid without informed consent and recorded legal review. Accepted. The ceremonial reserve will be managed by independent physicians and auditors. House Vane will have no access to it. Accepted. The crown released a low silver tone. The third path brightened, surrounding the royal line with 12 smaller lights. The throne remained, but absolute rule did not. Cassian's voice sharpened. Her title has not been proven, the crown responded. The stolen velvet rose from the evidence table and unfolded above the chamber. Silver stitches restored the section Cassian had hidden. Isabella appeared beside a human woman holding the crown beneath black cloth. The scholar stared at the image. Miriam Morgan. Isabella's preserved voice filled the chamber. The Morgan line will carry the trust until a ruler is judged worthy. They do not inherit the throne, they protect the people from it. The memory shifted. Eleanor Morgan appeared inside the Vane estate, sewing the crown into the old curtain. She wrapped its magical core through the fabric so no one outside her line could detect it. Then she marked the curtain for a future liquidation and carved the needle and moon into her sewing machine. Rachel? Eleanor said across the years, I did not know when the crown would awaken. I only trusted that when it did, you would recognize the work. Rachel's eyes filled, but her hands remained steady. The memory changed one final time. Isabella stood inside her chamber while a man wearing Alessandro's face entered. The illusion dissolved. Cassian appeared beneath it, younger but unmistakable. The record showed his signet opening the royal wards. It showed him placing a Vane compound into Isabella's ceremonial cup. It showed the royal physician's seal recording the same compound later found in the preserved evidence. Then Cassian altered the memory cloth and removed the royal seal, leaving Alessandro to be blamed when he arrived. The crown had not offered an accusation. It had restored a complete record supported by physical evidence. Lady Seraphine faced the gallery. Cassian Vane is formally charged with treason, unlawful imprisonment, corruption of royal law, manipulation of the royal bond, and responsibility for Queen Isabella's death. Cassian raised one hand. Red light gathered around his fingers, but the crown turned toward him. Every vein mark on his clothing faded to grey. But his access to council wards, binding magic, and ceremonial authority was sealed pending trial. The guards escorted him from the gallery. Rachel stepped toward Alessandro. Kneel. The chamber froze. Alessandro lowered himself before her. Not as a man submitting to another person, but as a king accepting that law stood above him. Rachel placed the crown on his head. Silver light entered the royal bond and separated the dark contamination from the clean pattern, containing it so the physicians could remove it safely over time. Alessandro Romano, Rachel said, you may continue as king only while you remain worthy of those you rule. He looked up at her. Then never stop judging me honestly. The crown answered with one final pulse. The throne survived. Unlimited power did not. 3 months later, morning light filled Morgan alterations without a trace of silver magic. The shop still smelled of pressed wool, cedar drawers, and the coffee Rachel forgot whenever a difficult seam demanded her full attention. The overdue notices were gone, not because Alessandro had paid them, but because Rachel had signed a restoration contract with the Independent Royal Archive. 3 appraisers had valued her work before the agreement was approved. The first payment cleared her commercial loan. The second repaired the leaking roof. The third allowed her to hire 2 women, rebuilding their lives after financial hardship. Above the register hung Eleanor Morgan's photograph beside a brass plaque naming her as a protector of the Crown Trust. Miriam Morgan and every erased keeper had also been restored to the royal record. At Romano Hall, the new charter had become binding law. 3 human representatives now sat beside the 12 bloodhouses, medical associations, legal organizations, and civic councils, each elected 1 representative for a 4-year term. Neither the king nor the keeper could appoint or dismiss them. Required 2 verified Tej copies, an independent translation, and public review before enforcement. The ceremonial reserve was managed by physicians and outside auditors. No command involving blood, property, memory, or loyalty could be issued without informed consent. Rachel served as keeper, but she did not live at Romano Hall. She maintained an office there, attended formal reviews, and returned to her sewing machine when the work was complete. The crown had not made her royal. It had made her responsible for questioning royalty. Cassian Vane received a public trial under the charter he had tried to prevent. The restored memory cloth, the Vane compound preserved in Isabella's ceremonial cup, the altered statutes, and the testimony of Marcus and Helena established his responsibility for Isabella's death and the corruption of Alessandro's bond. He was sentenced to permanent confinement in Greyhaven Fortress. Its wards were supervised jointly by the Independent Archive, the Council, and the Keeper. Every vein, mirror gate, and hidden binding connected to him was dismantled. Cassian retained his life, but no path back to authority. Marcus was removed from command and barred from every security system. His coercion, cooperation, and warning reduced his sentence to 1 year of supervised service, during which he helped investigators locate vein bindings without holding rank or issuing orders. Helena received protection, housing, and complete treatment from the royal physicians. The Red Oath never returned. Lady Seraphine became the first chair of the Independent Legal Archive. She trusted documents more than people, which Rachel considered useful now that no single person could secretly rewrite them. Alessandro's recovery took 10 weeks. The crown contained the corruption, but physicians removed it gradually from his royal bond. Every contaminated reserve was destroyed. The false eclipse wards were dismantled. Monthly examinations confirmed that no trace of the vein pattern remained. When the final dark line disappeared from beneath his wrist, Alessandro visited Isabella's memorial alone. Later, he added the names of the lost keepers beside hers. On the first snowy evening of December, the bell above Rachel's shop door rang 6 minutes after closing. Alessandro entered carrying a black ceremonial coat folded over one arm. His face was still vampire pale, but the strain of the poison had vanished. "The shoulder seam opened," he said. Rachel examined it. "Kings usually have staff for this." The staff said the keeper recognizes honest work. "That sounds like flattery. I have been told mine lacks subtlety." Rachel almost smiled. He placed a folded rental listing on the cutting table instead of a key. "There is a house available across the street," he said. "I have not signed anything." Rachel looked up. "Why are you showing me?" "Because living closer would make council work easier, and because I would like to know you beyond hearings and laws. But I will not make that decision without asking how you feel about it." Rachel studied the listing, then the ancient king, waiting for an answer he could not command. "You may schedule a viewing," she said. "That is not permission to move in." "Understood." "Dinner first. Friday at 7. No guards inside the restaurant." "Agreed. No royal reservation that closes the entire place." Alessandro paused. "Agreed." Rachel threaded a needle and began repairing his coat. He sat in the customer chair beside the window while snow softened the streets of Blackridge. When the final stitch was secure, she closed the shop, turned off the brass lamp, and stepped outside beside him. The crown remained at Romano Hall beneath law and watchful eyes. Here there was only snow, quiet conversation, and a future neither blood nor destiny had chosen for them. Rachel had not escaped the darkness. She had taught it to walk beside the light.